Hello everyone, Pedro here with CineMilled, and welcome to the first episode of CineMilled's This versus That. And in today's episode, we have an answer to a question that a lot of you have asked me, which is, what is the difference between the basic version of the NODO Inertia wheels, or what some people refer to as the brushless version, and the Inertia wheels Max version? All right, so let's get into it. So over the years, this question has come up over and over again in the Facebook groups, in different places on the internet, and most of all in phone call questions. You guys are getting ready to make your purchase decision on which wheel to go with, and you pick up the phone and you give us a call at CineMilled, and of course I answer, and we get into it. And invariably the first question is, can you give me more insight into what is the difference between the, let's call it the base model, or the brushless version of the inertia wheels, and the Max? And so at first, physically, apart from the wheel itself, it is the same unit, right? So the main, where the motherboard and the screen is and the dials is literally exactly the same part. The pedestal, the base plate, that is all exactly the same. The radio system technology inside of it is exactly the same. It's got that revolutionary dual band system, right? Transmits on 900, receives on 2.4, all that good stuff. So basically all of that is the same. And what really separates these two, physically, it's clearly apparent. It is the actual wheel. So you see here on the brushless version of the wheel, that basically is just a big piece of aluminum, and you can clearly see that. And then on the Max version, it is this really cool internally LED lit wheel with this big black center right here, right? So physically, it's really easy to tell the brushless version from the Max just by looking at the wheel, right? One's fully aluminum colored, silver, and the Max has the black center and the LED lights internally, right? So really easy to tell the difference. So let's get into the heart of the issue. What are you really getting for the extra cost of the Max? What is the really bare bones difference between the two? So I don't know about you, but I'm a car guy and my tendency is to make a lot of automotive analogies. So hopefully you can follow with me. I haven't found a better analogy yet, but the base model NODO, the brushless version, is, I kind of equate it to a 3 Series BMW, which is a very high-end automobile, very high performing. I think the 3 Series has been sedan of the year for like 20 or 30 years, right? It's an amazing product. It is an amazing technology, amazing execution, allows you to do incredible things. By all accounts, the BMW 3 Series, just like these NODO wheels here, are a great purchase, a solid investment, and a solid performer. Now, the Max version is kind of like the BMW M3, right? So for those of you who are not familiar, the M3 BMW is the sports, the high performance version of the 3 Series BMW. Externally, they're mostly the same. They have a few differences, but internally, they're very different. And for the person that demands, that craves a higher performance out of their car, there is no substitute than the BMW M3. And just like in the car world, the NODO Max are very much like that. As you learn and explore more about working with drag and inertia, which is the main thing that the inertia wheels allow you to do that any other wheel in the market does not allow you to do, is adjust those settings, right? You're not stuck with the inertia that comes on the whatever material the wheel is built. And it achieves this perception of inertia or mass and drag, not by a physical, dragging physically on the wheel. So for a lot of you that don't know, gear heads and other remote heads, including the DJI Master Wheels, achieve drag by dragging kind of like a brake pad, a piece of felt or something, physically against the wheel, just like you would a disc brake in a car or a bicycle, right? So it's a physical uh, impartation of drag, right? It's just like pressing the brakes on your car. The pads are actually touching a metal surface and slowing you down. So that's what happens with the master wheels. That's what happens with a lot of gear heads, a lot of remote heads in the market. With the inertia wheels, there is no physical contact. Everything is happening because of electricity and the algorithms that control the flow of electricity. So with the inertia wheels, it's creating the feeling of drag and the feeling of mass by manipulating electromagnetic fields, right? So using electricity and magnets and an algorithm, complex algorithm, to give you the feeling. It's not an illusion because it actually feels different, right? It feels like there's drag. It feels like there's more mass. It does that through magnets and electricity. And so this is where we circle back to the main difference between the brushless and the NODO Max. And so luckily for me, I have a very practical example here for you. So this is literally the brushless motor that is inside of these wheels right here in the center, all right? And as you can see here, it basically resembles something you might have seen before, which is a drone motor, right? This is a very typical, common electrical motor used in drones and any number of different devices out there in the world. So you got a copper coil, you got magnets around the outside, you got a metal stator that reacts with those magnets, and you can either generate movement, like the propeller on a drone, or slow it down, right? Just like you slow down an electric car, like a Tesla, just by the deceleration, the reversing of the polarity of the motor. So by manipulating all that, you can create drag and create the feeling of inertia. And so this is pretty amazing. Now, with the Max, they're using a completely new, novel electrical motor design. And it's based on a printed circuit board like you would find in a computer that's embedded with copper. And then you'll have a big metal disc with embedded magnets, right? And so this is literally the motor. This is what the motor looks like, right? As opposed to this, that is inside of the inertia wheels. So because of the mechanical design, the layout of this motor, basically with the same electrical voltage that you would input into this wheel in order to achieve a specific torque number, you can generate a lot more torque with this motor design than you can with this motor design. And also you can generate the same amount of torque using less electricity. And so this is really a game changer because it allows you to have much more torque in a smaller package using less electricity. And on top of that, it offers 3 to 4 times the resolution, the positioning accuracy of a brushless setup, right? So this is really a game changer. And some of you may know or may not know that NODO is working on a remote head, sort of like a follow-up or an evolution of a Ronin 2, let's say. And they have named that product the Torque Head. So it's getting pretty close to completion. It's a really exciting product. And it utilizes the same motor design, much for the same reasons. You get an incredible amount of torque for a lot less electricity use, right? So anyways, that is the main difference between the two products is the motor technology. Now, let's get into what does this do for you? What can you do with the Max motor? What does it offer up to you as an operator operating wheels versus the brushless motor? So this is really where the rubber meets the road, because now we're going to get into what are the practical results of each technology and what it actually offers up to you of value to the operator in a practical sense. Now, to understand that, you need to have a really good grasp and you need to have a really good value assigned in your head to being able to adjust drag and inertia. If you don't have a good understanding of what it means to adjust drag and inertia, you're going to have a really tough time rationalizing the decision to go with the NODO Max versus the NODO Brushless, right? So let's dive into that subject just a little bit. And this is one of those things that's really difficult unless you're at a trade show or you have one of these in front of you, for me to tell you, the viewer, what the difference is, because it comes down to your hands. It comes down to a feeling. So how do I describe a feeling to you, the viewer? So I saw another operator, Chris, talk about this in a video that he has on his YouTube channel, and I also agree that it was a great visual representation of a good way for you to visualize the difference and actually what drag does versus inertia, adding inertia or removing inertia. Separate the two halves. So I'm going to take this, it's basically, we're going to use it as a weight today, and I'm going to slide that onto the handle, all right? So let me remove all inertia adjustments and all mass adjustments from the inertia wheels. And so what we're going to do now, let me slide this a little bit closer to me here. All right, so if I take this and I take it to the 12 o'clock position with no drag and no inertia, let's take a look and see what happens. As you can see, it drops very fast and swings wildly back and forth, slowly expending that energy that from the acceleration of the drop, right? So it's Newton's law of physics. An object in motion wants to remain in motion, and it starts losing energy every time it oscillates until it comes to a stop. So if we put a timer to that, let's call it took 10 seconds to stop moving, right? Now, if I add inertia to that, so I just took that all the way to 10, right? And now let's let go of it and see what happens. You can see how much slower it accelerated and how much slower each oscillation is, right? And so for a really simple reason, now that we've taken this wheel virtually from, let's call it 0 pounds all the way to a 10-pound wheel, something that has a lot of mass like a train takes a lot of energy to get going, right? And so this is why when you let go of it, it takes a few seconds to really start accelerating, right? So that's just inertia, that's just mass in play, that's just physics. And the crazy thing is that it's doing this virtually by manipulating the motors, right? But this is exactly how this wheel would function if it really did weigh 10 pounds, okay? So it's gonna keep oscillating until it comes to a stop. And let's say if we put a timer on that, it went from 10 seconds all the way to 20 seconds, right? And you see it's gonna keep going because it has more inertia. So it's gonna oscillate for longer, right? It's still going. All right, let's go ahead and stop that. Now, if I leave the inertia the same and I add drag, right? Drag is, remember, we're like applying the brakes to it. So I'm going to increase the drag. It goes from 0 to 15. I'm going to take it all the way to max. All right, and now I'm going to let go. And what you're going to see is it's almost like you're driving a car and you're dragging on the brakes, right? If you stop accelerating, eventually you're going to come to a stop a lot sooner. See? So it's still accelerated slowly, but it very quickly is going to come to a stop. It's still oscillating back and forth, but very quickly it's going to come to a stop, right? So there you go. You have a very clear visual representation of what you will feel with your hands when you're operating. So one of the things you've just noticed is if you use that setting, for example, the wheels, if you need to do a very slow pan or a tilt, this is a great setting, right? If you're not looking to start or stop really fast, this gives you a lot of finesse. And if you need to come to a stop and hold the shot, by having the drag really high, it'll stop and then it'll stay there. It won't easily move, right? You can bump it even and it's not gonna move, right? Without you having to adjust deadband or anything like that. So let's try something different now. Let's leave the drag high and remove inertia. So we're gonna go from 10 of mass, right, down to 0, right? So now We have a very lightweight wheel, but we're using the brakes a lot. Let's take a look and see what happens. Did you just see that? So completely different result than the two previous, right? Now it accelerated really fast because there is no mass to the wheel, right? The wheel weighs 0 pounds. And because there's no mass and we are applying the drag a lot, the car comes to a stop like really quickly, right? If you have a really lightweight bicycle and really powerful brakes, guess what's going to happen? You're going to stop in a really short distance. So this allows you to impart a quick movement with the camera, yet come to a nice controlled stop, right? You're not going to overshoot your landing. So again, very important to really understand and be able to manipulate these settings for your benefit while you're trying to achieve a certain result for a certain kind of shot. All right, and then we can mix and match between those two settings. We can take the drag to a different number, less drag, and so this is going to oscillate too much. There's no inertia. So let's go to 5 on the inertia there, and now it's going to oscillate, but it's a halfway point. So there is a lot of finesse in the middle there. So now, hopefully, you have a much better understanding of mass and inertia. And so now let's circle back to where this video started. Why would you want to buy the Max versus the brushless version? So the main characteristic of this inertia system that they created is that you can overpower it. If you put a really high mass or drag, and you need to do a really quick movement, right? The motors, especially if you're not feeding it enough voltage, because this all works on voltage, on power. The more power you can feed this motor, the more you're going to be able to push these motors to a more extreme setting, right? So right now we're running AC power to both of them, which is feeding them plenty of voltage, an equal amount of voltage, right? So now if I turn up the inertia on this, and it takes a lot of effort, and I stop suddenly, it loses it goes limp, right? It tries to brake, and then it just doesn't have enough power, and it goes limp. Now, so this is something that doesn't happen very often, because it's not often you need to you need to move really fast and come to a sudden stop. So it's not often in movies you're going to be panning completely to one direction and then having to change to the other direction, unless maybe you're filming for Wes Anderson or you're shooting La La Land or something like that. But so it's very rare that you're going to encounter that situation. But when you do, the easiest thing, the fix for this phenomenon with the inertial wheel system is just to simply lower your inertia or lower your drag to a setting where that doesn't happen anymore. So this range of, you have 0 to 10 on a setting, but if you need to start or stop really quickly at a high inertia or drag setting, so you may not be able to do that at an 8 setting, but you may be able to do that at a 5 or a 4 setting, right? So you can call that the dynamic range of the inertia wheel, so of the inertia wheel effect, so to speak. So the dynamic range of a camera is the difference between low to high. So this is the same thing with the NODO wheels. It's the range from 0 mass to maximum mass, or 0 drag to maximum drag, but the usable, right? So you have this window, and depending on how much voltage you feed it, you increase the usable range of this when you're doing a very aggressive setup. So when you switch over to the Max, and we're talking about this circuit board motor technology that they're using, because it can have a lot more torque for the same amount of voltage we're feeding it, right? We're feeding it, both of them, from the wall right now. So for that same amount of voltage, this has that much more torque, right, at the axle. And so what this means is, whereas with this one, if I have it at 6 or 7 and I come to a sudden stop, and for whatever reason, I want to have a lot of mass or drag, it'll have that effect where it'll go limp, right? Now it comes back or a few seconds after that effect happens, but enough to maybe blow the shot for you. So that's why you're going to want to dial it down so you can avoid that. That's that usable range. Given the same voltage, let's just say that this one you can go from 0 to 5 with a really aggressive move, right? You can turn it up to a 5 and not have that not happen. But if you go to a 6 or 7, that side effect might happen. Whereas with the max, you can go to a 7 or an 8, right? So that's variable because it depends on how quickly you come to a stop, right? So for example, if I turn the inertia high, you can see there, it lifted up the entire wheel. So let's try that again. You saw that? So, and I come to a stop, it's lifting the entire wheel, right? So these motors have a lot more torque. The same way the BMW M3 has more horsepower, the NODO Max have more torque. So that range of usable adjustment in the mass and the drag settings is a lot larger on the Max. All right, so hopefully that brings you a lot more clarity on the difference between each of these motors, what it actually means in your hands, right? You have more torque. You can, if you want, you can come to a more sudden start or a sudden stop in a given camera move and have the ability to use higher settings before there's a motor dropout, right? Before it goes limp or there's that side effect that happens when you push it too far. So basically, that is only valuable to you the more you value and use the power of adjusting the mass and the drag. So this is why what I see a lot of is people will buy the brushless. Over time, they will really learn how to make the most out of those settings. And then when they try the max version, they appreciate it that much more, and then it rationalizes the extra cost that comes with the Max. Aside from that, like I mentioned previously, it's 3 to 4 times higher resolution, but that is really kind of splitting hairs. To me, that's a less important differentiator, because the fact is the brushless version already has incredible reaction resolution to the movement of your hand versus the movement of the gimbal, especially when you compare it to other products out there. So it's not like you're going to be disappointed with the resolution of these wheels. This is an amazing set of wheels, amazing performance, amazing capability. It's just these take it a step beyond, right? And they take everything that's good about the brushless version of the NODO wheels and take it to the max, take it to the next level, right? So ultimately, if you're somebody who's really pushing the limits of shots, if you're really understanding the inertia system and making the most out of it, and you want to future-proof your setup, and you're just going to find you're going to be able to take a lot more advantage of the performance that's inherent to the Max setup. Much like my earlier analogy of the regular 3 Series and the M3, you can take your regular mom and pop commuter and put them in an M3 on a racetrack, and they're really not going to go that much faster than the regular 3 Series. But if you take a race car driver and you compare the lap times of a regular 3 Series and an M3, the M3 is going to be much faster around a racetrack. And so what that means is the higher your skills as an operator, the more you'll be able to extract, or the more you're going to be able to use out of the Max system. So ultimately, it's down to you. The better you get with it, the more you're going to appreciate and use the power and performance that the Max brings to the table. All right, guys. So that is our first episode of This versus That. I hope that clears that question up. And if you still have questions, feel free, leave them in the comments below. I'm usually pretty good at answering everybody's questions. Even if I don't do it right away, I do my research, I get back to you. Of course, you can always call us at CineMilled. I get busy, but once again, I always try to get back to you as best I can. There is a NODO user, Inertia Wheels user group on Facebook, which is also a great place to get advice, ask questions, get some opinions, and all that. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. You found this useful. If you did, please like and subscribe to our channel so you can keep motivating me to make more videos like this. And that's it. That's all we got for today. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one.